The morning sun barely crested the horizon when Sergeant Maria Santos laced up her combat boots for what would become the most defining day of her military career. At 26, she had already distinguished herself as one of the finest marksmen at Fort Braxton. But today's annual weapons qualification would test every skill she had honed over 8 years of service. Maria stepped out of her barracks into the crisp October air, her breath forming small clouds as she walked toward the armory. The base was unusually quiet, with most personnel still sleeping before the day's activities began. She preferred these early hours when her mind felt sharpest and her hands steadiest. Today's qualification would determine not only her continued status as a weapons instructor, but also her eligibility for an upcoming special operations assignment she had been pursuing for months. The armory buzzed with controlled chaos as weapons specialists prepared equipment for the day's trials. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran with calloused hands and sharp eyes, managed the distribution of firearms with military precision. Maria approached the counter and presented her identification card, watching as Rodriguez checked his roster and reached for a weapon from the rack behind him. "Here you go, Santos," Rodriguez said, sliding an M4 carbine across the metal counter. "Serial number checked, cleaning verified, ready for action." The weapon appeared standard issue, its black polymer and metal surfaces gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Maria accepted the rifle with practiced ease, performing her routine inspection with methodical thoroughness. She examined the exterior for obvious damage, checked the trigger mechanism, and verified the safety functions. Everything appeared normal during her visual inspection. The weapon felt familiar in her hands, balanced and properly maintained according to standard protocols. She signed the equipment log and secured the rifle in her carrying case, unaware that a critical malfunction lay hidden within the firing mechanism. Walking toward the shooting range, Maria encountered fellow soldiers preparing for their own qualifications. Lieutenant Commander Harrison, a competitive shooter from the naval base next door, offered a friendly nod as he adjusted his gear. "Looking forward to seeing those legendary Santos groupings today," he said with genuine respect. Maria had earned recognition throughout the joint base for her exceptional marksmanship, consistently placing shots within impossibly tight patterns. The shooting range occupied several acres of carefully maintained grounds, with targets positioned at distances ranging from 50 to 800 meters. Range masters had spent the previous evening setting up fresh targets and calibrating electronic scoring systems. The October morning provided ideal conditions with minimal wind and clear visibility, factors that would normally favor Maria's precise shooting style. Captain Williams, the range officer, gathered the qualification participants for their briefing. 37 soldiers, sailors, and Marines stood in formation as he explained the day's procedures. "Today's qualification follows standard protocol with one exception," Williams announced. "We're implementing a new time standard that reduces your shooting windows by 15%. This change reflects real-world conditions where split-second decisions determine mission success." Maria absorbed this information without concern. She had consistently completed qualifications well within time limits, often finishing with minutes to spare. Her shooting philosophy emphasized smooth, deliberate movements rather than rushed, frantic actions. She believed that proper breathing, steady positioning, and consistent trigger control mattered more than speed alone. The first group of shooters took their positions on the firing line. Maria watched their performances while mentally rehearsing her own routine. She observed wind flags, noted how other shooters' bullets tracked, and adjusted her mental calculations accordingly. Her systematic approach to preparation had become legendary among her peers, who often sought her advice on improving their own marksmanship. When her group's turn arrived, Maria approached Lane 7 with quiet confidence. She unpacked her equipment methodically, arranging magazines, tools, and accessories according to a pattern she had refined through countless practice sessions. Her routine never varied because consistency in preparation led to consistency in performance. Loading her first magazine with 30 rounds of standard ammunition, Maria inserted it into the magazine well with a satisfying click. She chambered the first round and assumed her shooting position, feeling the familiar weight of the weapon against her shoulder. The target downrange appeared clearly through her iron sights, the black bullseye contracting to a precise point of focus. The range officer's whistle signaled the beginning of the first shooting exercise. 20 rounds at 200 meters within 4 minutes. Maria aligned her sights, controlled her breathing, and applied gentle pressure to the trigger. The moment she expected the rifle to fire, nothing happened. The trigger had depressed completely, but no shot had occurred. Maintaining her composure despite the unexpected malfunction, Maria performed immediate action procedures. She tilted the rifle to inspect the chamber, looking for signs of a misfire or ammunition failure. The brass cartridge appeared properly seated, with no obvious defects. She attempted to fire again, with identical results. The trigger functioned mechanically, but failed to initiate the firing sequence. Time continued counting down as Maria quickly assessed her options. Range protocol prohibited switching weapons during qualification, unless safety concerns existed. The malfunction appeared to be internal to the firing mechanism rather than a simple ammunition issue. Other shooters around her continued firing normally, their rifles producing the sharp cracks of properly functioning weapons. Maria's mind raced through potential solutions while precious seconds elapsed. She had encountered similar malfunctions during training exercises and maintenance sessions, but never during formal qualification. The rifle's trigger group contained numerous small components that could prevent proper firing. Broken firing pins, damaged springs, or misaligned parts could all produce similar symptoms. With 3 minutes remaining in the first exercise, Maria made a critical decision that would define the remainder of her qualification. Instead of signaling for assistance or accepting a potential failure, she began systematically diagnosing the weapon's problem while maintaining her shooting position. Her years of weapons maintenance experience had taught her to identify common malfunctions by feel and sound rather than visual inspection alone. She manipulated the charging handle with careful attention to the mechanical feedback, listening for subtle differences in the action cycling. The bolt carrier moved normally, suggesting the problem lay within the trigger assembly rather than the larger operating system. Maria's fingers found the trigger guard and began applying pressure in slightly different ways, testing whether the malfunction might respond to alternative techniques. The other shooters completed their strings of fire while Maria continued troubleshooting her weapon. Range officers began noticing her situation but waited for her signal before intervening. Military protocol placed responsibility on individual shooters to manage equipment issues unless safety became a concern. With 2 minutes remaining, Maria discovered that applying trigger pressure at a specific angle and rate could occasionally overcome the malfunction. The technique required perfect timing and finger placement, skills that demanded her complete concentration. She would need to adapt her entire shooting style to accommodate this limitation while maintaining the accuracy and speed required for qualification. The challenge seemed impossible, but Maria had never accepted defeat easily. Her reputation had been built on overcoming obstacles that stopped other soldiers. This mechanical failure would test not only her marksmanship skills, but also her ability to adapt under extreme pressure. The next few minutes would determine whether her military career continued advancing or suffered a significant setback. As the first exercise concluded around her, Maria prepared for an unconventional qualification that would push every limit of her abilities. The jammed rifle in her hands had become both an obstacle and an opportunity to demonstrate the kind of exceptional performance that separates competent soldiers from extraordinary ones. The second exercise began immediately, allowing no time for extensive weapon repairs or adjustments. Maria faced 25 rounds at 300 meters within 5 minutes, requiring both accuracy and speed that her malfunctioning rifle seemed determined to prevent. She positioned herself carefully, knowing that every shot would demand perfect technique combined with the unconventional trigger manipulation she had discovered. Her first attempt, using the modified trigger technique, produced a successful shot, the bullet striking within the target's scoring rings. The method required applying pressure at a precise 30-degree angle while maintaining steady rearward force until the firing mechanism engaged. Maria felt a surge of cautious optimism, tempered by the realization that she had 24 more rounds to fire with this difficult process. The second shot took longer to achieve, requiring 3 attempts before the rifle fired. Maria's target showed a tight grouping, but her pace fell dangerously behind the required standard. Around her, other shooters maintained steady rhythms of fire while she struggled with each individual round. The mental pressure of her situation began testing her legendary composure as precious time continued disappearing. Captain Williams approached her position during a brief pause between strings. "Santos, do you need to switch weapons?" he asked quietly, his concern evident despite the formal military tone. "We can arrange a replacement rifle if necessary." Maria considered the offer seriously, knowing that a fresh weapon would eliminate her current difficulties but also reset her qualification progress. "Negative, sir," Maria replied after a moment's consideration. "I can adapt to this situation." Her decision surprised both the captain and herself, but something deeper than competitive pride drove her choice. She had spent years teaching other soldiers to overcome equipment failures in combat situations. Today would test whether she could apply those same principles under qualification pressure. The third exercise presented her greatest challenge yet. 30 rounds at 400 meters, within 6 minutes, including a mandatory reload sequence. Maria's modified shooting technique had improved with practice, but it still required significantly longer per shot than normal firing methods. She calculated quickly and realized she would need to achieve near-perfect accuracy to compensate for her reduced firing rate. Her strategy evolved during the exercise to maximize efficiency within her constraints. Instead of rushing, which would likely cause both timing and accuracy problems, Maria focused on making every shot count. She eliminated all unnecessary movements, streamlined her reloading process, and developed a rhythm that accommodated her trigger technique while maintaining steady progress. The fourth and fifth exercises tested her endurance as much as her skill. 600-meter shots required exceptional precision under normal circumstances, but Maria's situation demanded performance that bordered on the impossible. Her shoulders ached from maintaining awkward firing positions longer than usual, and her trigger finger had developed a slight tremor from the repeated stress of the modified technique. During the sixth exercise, something remarkable began happening. Maria's adaptation to the faulty trigger had forced her to slow down and focus more intensely on each shot than ever before. This heightened concentration produced groupings that were noticeably tighter than her previous qualifications. Her bullets clustered within impossibly small areas, creating patterns that impressed even experienced range officers. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, who had issued her the problematic rifle, watched from the equipment station with growing amazement. "That woman is doing something I've never seen," he commented to another armorer. "She's shooting better with a broken rifle than most people do with perfect equipment." Word of Maria's unusual performance began spreading among the range staff and waiting shooters. The seventh exercise introduced moving targets, mechanical silhouettes that traversed predetermined paths at varying speeds. Maria's trigger malfunction seemed particularly problematic for this challenge, since target engagement required split-second timing. She studied the target patterns carefully, memorizing their routes and speed changes to predict optimal shooting opportunities. Her first moving target shot required 4 trigger attempts before the rifle fired, but her bullet struck the target center despite the delay. Maria adjusted her technique for subsequent targets, beginning her trigger manipulation process earlier to compensate for the mechanical delay. This anticipatory timing demanded exceptional coordination between her eyes, hands, and mind. By the eighth exercise, Maria had developed what appeared to be an entirely new shooting methodology. Other participants and range officers gathered to observe her unconventional technique, which produced results that defied logical explanation. Her broken rifle had somehow become an instrument of precision that exceeded the capabilities of properly functioning weapons in other hands. The ninth exercise tested night vision shooting skills using simulated low-light conditions. Electronic targets appeared briefly in darkened lanes, while shooters used flashlights and special scopes to engage them. Maria's familiarity with her rifle's quirks had reached the point where she could predict when the trigger would engage based on subtle mechanical feedback. Lieutenant Commander Harrison approached during a break between exercises. "Santos, I've been watching your performance today," he said with obvious respect. Whatever you're doing with that rifle is extraordinary. Your groups are smaller than anything I've seen in 15 years of competitive shooting." Maria acknowledged the compliment, while internally marveling at how adversity had pushed her abilities beyond their previous limits. The 10th and 11th exercises combined multiple challenges: long-range precision, time pressure, and challenging environmental conditions as artificial wind machines created variable air currents across the range. Maria's intense focus had entered an almost meditative state where her modified trigger technique felt increasingly natural despite its mechanical difficulty. Range officers began documenting her performance with unusual attention to detail. Master Sergeant Chen, the senior marksmanship instructor, took detailed notes on her grouping sizes and overall scores. "This is either going to be a remarkable success story or a very unusual equipment failure report," he commented to Captain Williams while reviewing the preliminary results. The 12th exercise presented Maria's final major challenge: rapid-fire sequences requiring quick target engagement at multiple distances. Her rifle's malfunctions seemed designed to prevent exactly this type of shooting, but Maria had learned to work within her constraints rather than fight against them. She developed burst techniques that grouped her trigger attempts together, increasing her success rate for difficult shots. Her endurance faced its ultimate test during the 13th and 14th exercises. Hours of fighting with her equipment had physically exhausted her, but her mental determination remained unshaken. She had committed to proving that skill and determination could overcome mechanical limitations, and retreat was no longer an option her mind would consider. The 15th and final exercise required combination shooting: precision accuracy, speed, and tactical movement. Maria rose from her firing position for the first time in hours, her body protesting the change after extended periods of adapted positioning. She moved through the course with her malfunctioning rifle, engaging targets at various ranges while demonstrating that her unusual technique worked under dynamic conditions. As the last shot of her qualification echoed across the range, Maria felt a mixture of exhaustion and accomplishment unlike anything she had experienced before. She had completed every exercise despite equipment that should have prevented any meaningful performance. The true measure of her achievement would come when the electronic scoring systems calculated her final results, but she already knew she had pushed herself beyond any previous limits. The electronic scoring systems processed Maria's results while she carefully cleaned her malfunctioning rifle, performing the ritual maintenance that had become second nature over her military career. Her hands moved automatically through the familiar motions while her mind remained focused on the extraordinary day she had just completed. She felt confident about her performance despite the mechanical challenges, but the numerical confirmation would determine whether her adaptation efforts had succeeded. Master Sergeant Chen approached the scoring station with unusual urgency, his experienced eyes studying the digital readouts with obvious surprise. He consulted his tablet computer, cross-referencing numbers against historical records that went back 15 years. His expression shifted from curiosity to amazement as he verified the calculations multiple times, unable to believe the results displayed before him. "Captain Williams, you need to see this immediately," Chen called, across the range control area. The scoring systems showed numbers that seemed impossible, given the circumstances they had all witnessed. Maria's aggregate score had not only achieved qualification but exceeded every previous record in the base's documented history by a substantial margin. Captain Williams examined the results with the same disbelief that had captured Chen's attention. "Are you certain these calculations are correct?" he asked, pointing to specific numbers on the display. This performance would represent the highest qualification score ever recorded at Fort Braxton, and she achieved it with equipment that was clearly malfunctioning. The preliminary results showed Maria's accuracy percentage at an unprecedented 97.4%, with grouping measurements that averaged less than half the diameter of previous record holders. Her scores in individual exercises had consistently exceeded expert-level standards, with several exercises showing perfect or near-perfect results despite the time penalties caused by her trigger problems. Range officers gathered around the scoring station as word spread through the facility about the unusual results. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez brought the maintenance log for Maria's rifle, confirming that the weapon had indeed experienced a significant firing mechanism failure that should have prevented normal qualification completion. "I've been issuing weapons for 12 years, Rodriguez explained to the growing crowd of personnel. That rifle had a broken striker spring that should have made it impossible to fire consistently. I have no idea how she managed to complete the qualification, let alone achieve these scores." The maintenance inspection revealed that Maria had somehow worked around a malfunction that typically required armory-level repairs. Maria continued her post-exercise routine, unaware that her performance had created such a stir among the range staff. She completed her equipment inventory, secured her gear, and prepared to depart when Captain Williams approached her with an expression that combined official formality with genuine amazement. "Sergeant Santos, we need you to remain available for result verification," Williams informed her. "Your qualification performance today has achieved something remarkable that requires additional documentation." Maria sensed from his tone that something significant had occurred, but the captain's words provided few details about the specific nature of her results. The verification process required Maria to demonstrate her modified shooting technique for range officers and weapons specialists who needed to understand how she had overcome her equipment limitations. She explained her diagnostic process, showed the specific trigger manipulation method she had developed, and fired several demonstration rounds under controlled observation. Lieutenant Commander Harrison documented her technique with video equipment, while weapons specialists examined the internal mechanics of her rifle. "This is going to revolutionize how we teach malfunction management," Harrison observed. "You've developed a field-expedient solution that works better than normal firing techniques under specific failure conditions." The base commander, Colonel Patricia Reeves, arrived at the range after receiving reports about the unusual qualification results. She reviewed the documentation personally, questioning range officers and examining the electronic scoring systems to ensure no errors had occurred in the data collection process. Her military career had included oversight of thousands of qualifications, but she had never encountered a situation comparable to Maria's performance. "Sergeant Santos," Colonel Reeves addressed her formally after completing her review. "Your qualification results today have established a new base record that exceeds the previous standard by 12%. More significantly, you achieved this performance while overcoming equipment failure that would have prevented most soldiers from completing basic qualification requirements." The formal announcement of Maria's record drew personnel from across the base who wanted to witness the recognition ceremony. Her achievement represented more than exceptional marksmanship. It demonstrated the kind of adaptability and determination that exemplified military excellence under adversity. The weapons specialist who examined her rifle provided technical details that made her accomplishment even more remarkable. "The striker spring failure should have created a 90% misfire rate," he explained to the assembled personnel. Somehow, Sergeant Santos developed a technique that overcame this limitation and actually produced more consistent results than normal firing methods. Media personnel from the base newspaper and regional military publications documented the ceremony as Maria received official recognition for her record-breaking qualification. Her story would be featured in training materials and used as an example of how proper mindset and technical knowledge could overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. The special operations assignment that had motivated her qualification attempt was immediately approved based on her demonstrated performance under pressure. Her new position would involve training other personnel in advanced marksmanship techniques and equipment failure management, skills that her unique experience had proven invaluable for combat readiness. Fellow soldiers approached Maria throughout the following weeks to learn her modified shooting techniques and equipment diagnostic methods. Her achievement had created interest that extended beyond simple marksmanship into broader questions about adaptability and problem-solving under stress. The rifle that had caused her so much difficulty became a training aid for weapons maintenance courses, where students learned to identify and work around common firing mechanism failures. Maria's experience provided practical examples that improved training effectiveness and prepared soldiers for equipment problems they might encounter in operational environments. 6 months later, Maria's techniques had been incorporated into official training manuals and qualification procedures. Her record remained unbroken, but more importantly, her problem-solving approach had prevented numerous mission failures when other soldiers encountered similar equipment malfunctions during deployments. The manufacturer of her rifle requested detailed reports about the failure and her adaptation methods, using the information to improve design specifications and quality control procedures. Her experience contributed to engineering changes that reduced the frequency of similar malfunctions in future production runs. Maria's military career accelerated rapidly following her record qualification. She received promotion opportunities, advanced training assignments, and recognition that reflected the exceptional capabilities she had demonstrated under pressure. Her story became part of Fort Braxton's institutional history, inspiring future generations of soldiers who faced their own seemingly insurmountable challenges. The morning when Maria received a jammed rifle had transformed from potential disaster into career-defining triumph through her refusal to accept defeat. Her achievement demonstrated that true expertise involved not just performing well under ideal conditions, but maintaining excellence when everything seemed designed to prevent success. The base record she held represented more than numbers on a scoreboard. It symbolized the power of human determination to overcome any obstacle through skill, creativity, and unwavering commitment to excellence.